Dead meme.
Hello, and back with some Valheim, and welcome to the Mistlands, a magical place filled with many surprises. But let's just jump into it. We're going to do a little biome overview and even look at some of the new magic spells and some of the new gear. So let's get into it. So as you may have guessed, due to its namesake, the Mistlands is a misty place. Basically, your visibility is near zero while in this place, assuming you don't have the next piece of equipment. So this is just to kind of give you an idea of what you're going to attempt to contend with if you come here without your Mistlight or your Wisp-Light. And the Wisp-Light will allow you to actually explore this biome at a reasonable level of success. Alright, so in order to make many of these new crafting stations, of course, you're going to need the materials found within the Mistlands. So, to begin our journey, we're going to need to build this Wisp Fountain. It's a pretty simple build. It requires some material from Yagluth's Torn Soul, some rocks. And at nighttime, these wisps show up. Hopefully you've kept a little bit of silver, because you're going to need it. And all you got to do to collect one of these guys is just hit E on them. There you go. And there's a few new lighting sources involving them. But moving on, this will be one of the pieces of equipment you're looking to build. This basically allows you to make some of the new weapons, such as the Crom, the Demolisher. We'll get a bit more into these guys as we go, but you'll require materials from the mines, and I'll show you that when we approach that part of the video. And of course, its associated upgrade. Here are some magic-related structures. Basically, spells are now available to you. You could be cool like those goblins in the Plains biome. And of course, as well, these are made with materials found in the mines, and with a new mechanic that we'll be showing you very soon. This guy is an Eider refinery. I'm going to go a little bit more in-depth than him, and I have a video that talks more specifically about him, if you're that interested. But what's really interesting, not only are there new mechanics such as the mist, there are new weapons. So we have a new type of bow available to us. The reload time is pretty brutal, but its damage is out of hand, and a upgraded ranged weapon, you're going to need it where we're going. So these new weapons, they're going to come from this crafting station, so you may not have access to some of these more useful pieces of equipment right away. But keep in mind, look at some of the item requirements. Iron and bronze for one of the best swords in the game, and iron again in the Demolisher, which might be arguably one of the most effective weapons in the game in close quarters. So some of your old school materials are going to get used up, like even as deep as bronze and as down to as low as bones. Something to keep in mind. Ammunition for the beautiful arbalist also requires some of the older materials in some cases, depending on the path you wish to choose. And the arbalist itself requires roots. I know not a lot of people farm the Abomination, but just keep that in mind. If you want to use some of these weapons, hopefully you've stored up some old school material. So looking at the two pieces of equipment, or two pieces of armor choices you have a heavier armor. Basically, it's like a powerful melee fighter with higher defense. And you have the caster's armor, but what is really important is, I think, the feather cape. Pretty much no matter what build you're choosing to roll with, I would get that feather cape for sure. Basically, it reduces your fall damage and protects you from the cold. Both of these pieces of equipment are going to require this refined Eider. Don't worry, we are going to get specific into how to make that, and even the mage-related stuff and the feather cape itself. You need a lot of this refined Eider. There's no new metal here. It's this refined Eider is the quote-unquote special resource. The upside is it can be teleported. So after you've collected your refined Eider and whatnot, you'll be able to craft some of these newer weapons. What's very interesting in this particular expansion is many of the equipments or pieces of equipment that have been neglected in the past you're seeing like a nice little, they're getting some love basically. So the Demolisher, which you might remember like the Stag Breaker, as you can see, it's rather damaging to everything that's near it. So be careful if you decide to use this within your base. But knives are a set of weapons that didn't see too much love until now. The combo's half decent. You can just hold it down and he'll combo his way through it, right? That's kind of cool. The other really neat one is the spear, and particularly its optional attack. If you hit the middle mouse button, you can do a nice little thunderstorm around you. There's an enemy that we'll be encountering later on that you'll find that very helpful with. And it's one of the more, well, it's definitely the hardest hitting spear. And it occasionally does lightning damage. Pretty cool. So, one huge difference is defenses are a little less passive. So, with some black metal, you can basically make what looks like a bear trap. And of course, you can make a ballista, which is a more active form of defense. Yeah. Devastating. So your artisan table finally has a use beyond just needing it to make a windmill nearby. These springs will be required to make the traps, like the bear-looking trap and the ballista. Of course, you'll also make your missiles for your ballista here. So the ballista requires ammunition. It operates on its own. There is a maximum range. There is a bug, apparently, where this thing will fire on you as well, at least at the time of recording. So let's turn off ghost mode. Yeah, there it is. So, if you use at your own risk, it's kind of unfortunate that, well, maybe it's a feature, but it's unfortunate that that is the case. And now for what is likely, or arguably, one of the more exciting parts of the expansion here, which is the access to magic. So there are some mushrooms you can get that will give you a new resource called Eider. There are some combination foods you can make with the cauldron and the cooking station. We'll get a bit more into that later, but I'm just going to kind of showcase to you some of the magic spells. So it does require a fair bit of Eider in order to cast. One option we do have as well is to equip the Eider related equipment to increase our Eider regeneration, which is this little purple bar that's building up right now. There you go. So blood magic requires health in order to cast. Be careful with it. But this little bubble will give you some protection. There's a frost spell, which it's not perfect aim, but it's decent. Like a kind of a spray and pray model. You have a nice little fireball. You've kind of seen the shaman throw like a shadow-like one, so it'll hit a target, cause some damage over time. So just to give you an example of what to expect while traveling the Mistlands, the majority of the terrain is utter trash. Like, I'm not too keen on this design. I think that it's a little too rugged, but it is what it is. One thing to keep in mind with the Feather Cape, you don't take fall damage. So all of this running and jumping through the mist and falling off of cliffs, which you will do, this cape will protect you. So this is one of the structures that can auto-generate. This is the equivalent of their crypt or dungeon. Commonly, these things have, what do you call them? And I'm like little dwarven-like creatures. And we'll get to them very soon. But we're just going to look at this infested mine. This is where many of the more rare materials you're going to need for your builds are going to be found. And of course, we'll review some of the enemies while we're here. This is the Tick. They don't do a lot of damage, but they'll jump on you and slowly drain your health. And we'll give you a little demonstration of that. So, luckily I've got God mode on. And them being all over you like this, see how I'm kind of like staggered the whole time. So, alright. And when they're on your back, you can get rid of them with this hammer. Hopefully they don't get you stuck in a stagger loop, because they'll just murder you. Not a fantastic enemy to encounter, that's for sure. The next enemy in here is also a swarming enemy. But again, this Demolisher seems to be where it's at. You can get a lot done with it. This is kind of the Bruiser. He's the Seeker Soldier. They do have a great deal of health. And their melee power is great. Even when staggered, they don't take a whole lot of damage. Now, one thing I've noticed in this particular biome is the inability to control the direction you swing. Very annoying. It's tough to get a good angle sometimes on an enemy. And there's lots of this nonsense that occurs. Enemies that can't reach you, you can't reach them. So carrying a variety of weapons is definitely a good idea. So just keep that in mind. This is the Seeker Bruiser. He will drop things you're going to need for your carapace armor and some of the other components. And this is a Seeker. He is significantly easier to deal with as opposed to that soldier. Unstaggered with just basically the sword, you could do him in pretty easily. This is a Black Core. Think of like a Surtling Core. These guys will allow you to build new crafting stations and some other components. This seems to be the only place where you can find them. But what is really interesting is this guy. You may need to use a weapon that could swing in the proper direction in order to acquire it. But basically this is the... let me find it for you. This is the sacrificial item that you'll require to access the boss. It's more of a key. You'll need 9 of them, so keep that in mind. Enemies in here drop royal jelly, a very useful crafting component for some foods, especially either-rich ones. These dungeons are definitely the most unique, with having pseudo-traps and pitfalls in them. There's also a lot of spaces that you should definitely check, like this is a wall to another section of the dungeon, and there's plenty of material in which to find in here, but the real prize, these weird little runes, and you'll see them throughout the, basically throughout the dungeon, and there'll be a bit of treasure in these various foods, potions, and sometimes even those black cores, which you'll need quite a few to make some of the new crafting stations. And these dungeons are rather windy. They are incredibly cramped, very easy to get swarmed, plenty of starred enemies in here. So the monsters in here as well drop some of their body parts and components. Everything from carapace to seeker meat and mandibles. These are going to be required to make many of these armors and weapons, right? So like the carapace armor, the heavier armor, is going to require these. You're going to need some of these mandibles to make tools and weapons. And the meat, of course, I'm sure you could figure it out. It's going to go into various recipes for food and some other things. These mines are just basically overrun versions of some of the other buildings that you're going to encounter, where we're going to go move on to those now. Throughout your travels, you're going to encounter these towers or bunker-looking areas. They're inhabited by these dwarves, or the Drevwar. I'm not sure exactly how you'd say their name, so forgive me. And if you turn off ghost mode, they're not hostile. They actually say hello, and if your game sounds are high enough, they'll say weird little grunts and groans. But what's important about these guys is they've warded off the area, and they've done this because, well, they care about the materials and things they have here. And particularly, they care about this. This component is going to be required in order to basically start getting Eider. The downside is, if there's a way to trade with these guys, no one has documented it yet. I don't believe there is. I believe you're going to need to resort to violence in order to acquire what you want. So keep in mind, there are mage versions. You've encountered this before in the plains. There are rogue versions, which are basically archers. So most of these guys are ranged if you damage their building, so let's do that. Yeah, see, best be careful if things go badly. So if you bust one of these things, you're going to set them off. Particularly if you bust this thing. Try not to hit him just so you can see it. And they've gone hostile. So we're at another tower containing these guys. I haven't attacked these guys or damaged their stuff, or this group. And as you can see, they're neutral. I wouldn't say friendly, just neutral. So every group of these guys you encounter will start at a neutral stage until you come and take their stuff from them. So this rubber component, basically, did I get one? Yes, I did. You can't teleport this thing. Basically, it's a crafting component. You're going to need it in order to acquire Eider. So you're going to have at least one confrontation with these guys, or wait for one of the towers to be cleared out by enemies. So we could find ourselves some ancient swords and ancient armor. They're very, very large. I suspect these were wielded by a Jotun, I believe is how it's said. And we can smash these up in order to acquire some metals. So I've smashed off the bottom piece of this sword, but it's connected up here as well. And I've acquired some scrap iron. If you destroy all the supports that's holding this thing up, it'll shatter into a whole bunch of iron. And since iron's needed for some of the materials or some of the weapons and gear that are being crafted in this area, this is a nice way to get it without having to visit the swamp. Well, as you can see, our dwarven friends are rather industrious. They're getting up to something here. So basically, those giant weapons and armor were likely being worn by the remains of whoever this is. This is a petrified bone. This is how you will get some black marble. But as well, you can get yourself some soft tissue here. Alright, so we've smashed our way into the skull here, and there's some soft tissue, which we've discussed is very important later. You get it basically from like the brains of these dead giants. And it's also structurally, it has a structure to it, so if you were to go to the bottom of this and mine out the bottom, the vast majority of it's going to fall on you. So you'll get soft tissue from mining into these skulls, and occasionally the dwarves drop it as well. I just used a dev command to kill a whole bunch of them to see if we would get some, but it's not common. Like, they do drop it. Looks like black marble. No. So you can get the soft tissue from these guys. It's not the reliable choice. Look for these bones. You can take it from their camps, or you can find bones that are not claimed by the dwarvish people yet. As well, while you're here, you might as well bust up all of the boxes and whatnot that they have, because as you can see, soft tissue is spilling out of them as well. And as you can see, you can encounter petrified bones that have not been claimed by the dwarven people, and you can mine into this and get some soft tissue here as well. So we have one part of the refined Eider, the components that you need to make the majority of the equipment that's really worth having here, particularly the spells. Now the next component comes from these ancient roots. If you remember when we talked about getting this extractor from those dwarven people, you have to steal it from them. You're also going to need a bunch of black metal and a crafting station and some of the wood that comes from this region. So you just take a black metal axe, cut down some wood, and you'll be able to craft this guy. So you'll need at least one extractor per. This tree will eventually kind of go to like a state where it needs to regenerate. But while we're here and we have our good friend here, the hare, this is a passive mob. Basically, there are starred variants, and of course, if you kill them, you'll get their meats and their skins, which are also required for many of the pieces of equipment here, particularly the armor. So a little bit of time has passed, and these sap extractors have some sap in them. So with this sap and the soft tissue, this is how you're going to get your refined Eider. Now, something to keep in mind, the components this is made from, like this extractor cannot be teleported with, like the needle that you get from the dwarf people and the black metal, can't teleport it. But you can teleport the sap that comes out of it. So it creates a bit of a logistics challenge, particularly because this, as you can see, the ancient root's glow is fading. So eventually you're going to need to let this root rest, and then you can move on to a different one and extract more and come back later. Here's a very fortuitous encounter. So I'm in ghost mode, so I should be ignored by this. I believe it's a yawl. This is probably the terror of this zone. They do a great deal of elemental damage, particularly in fire. As you can see, he's really going to town on those dwarves. And he flies. He's tough to kind of manage. He'll drop ticks as well, which, well, I showed you in the infested mine how fun they are. But they have a very large howl when you first encounter one, so you'll kind of know they're coming. This is probably one of the major reasons why I don't build anything here. These guys, there's his like aggro noise. These guys are such a pain to deal with. So, yeah, build here at your own risk. Definitely make something out of this black marble if you really insist on building here. So finally, this Iter refinery. You're gonna need all the stuff that we acquired from the various places to make this. Those black cores, a bunch of that Yggdrasil wood. So we're going to need sap, and we're going to need soft tissue. And you throw the sap in the bottom slot, and you throw the soft tissue in the top. It's just like a forge. As long as you just got it in your hand and hit, or in your inventory, hit E, it'll basically take care of it for you. Now, there's some notable things about this guy. It fires off harmful particles, which will destroy some structures and your crafting stations. And even the byproduct, the refined item that spits out of it, also fires off harmful particles. So, I did do a video that talks more about how to protect your base. I set up a little bit experiment, so you can see what it does and how to protect your base from this thing doing its process. But I'll leave a link to that because that's kind of getting outside of the purview of the video. Like, it's already going a bit long. So we're at the point now where I think we should summarize. After defeating Yagluth, you'll take the Torn Souls he drops with just simply some rocks. You'll attract wisps with this device here. This will allow you to make the Wisp Light. This will allow you to actually enter the Mistlands and be able to see what you're doing. Once you explore some crypts, or their version of the crypt or the dungeon, which is known as an infested mine, you'll acquire black cores. You'll need 5 to build this guy, and this guy. So you'll need 15 altogether in order to actually craft all of the components. This crafting station is required to make the item that will allow you to access the boss. So you'll need at least this. You can also, if you only have 5 black cores, you can break these down and build and rebuild them as you need them. So I can break this guy down, take his 5 black cores to make him. Not ideal, but you can do it. There are 2 pieces of armor here to keep in mind. They require this material to actually get produced. Very powerful, heavy armor, as well as a mage-related set of gear, which increases your magic regeneration. You'll need this table to make, hold on, let's turn off all craft, to make many of the magic-related items. You'll also need your artisan table to make ammunition for your defenses, which are a little bit more proactive for a change. The 2 new mushrooms can be cultivated, but as you can see, they won't grow in this environment. Here's some of some of those new mushrooms, the Jotun puffs. And when you pick one, you get 3 of them. And you get some mage caps as well. They're the blue ones. And you can cultivate these guys, but you're gonna have to do it in some grassy territory in the Mistlands, because they will not grow elsewhere. The downside is hostile NPCs will destroy and attack them. And with the Yggdrasil sap and some soft tissue, you'll make your refined Iter, and this will let you make your new pieces of equipment, particularly your magic spells. And of course, if you liked the video and you found it helpful, like a sub or a like would be pretty cool. If you want to maybe throw some information in there that didn't get covered here, particularly for time's sake, go ahead, throw it down there. And again, thanks for showing up. See you all again real soon.